I was born in the UCLA hospital, lived in Brentwood for 2 years of my life with my mother and my pops. Somehow they ended up in Las Vegas, Nevada. Of course, I don't remember what happened. They told me they were struggling and my pops was addicted to heroin. When I look back, I knew it had to be hard without no family members out there to help them with 2 kids, me and my sister. And heroin was an expensive drug, so I know it was hard. My mother left Las Vegas with me and my sister to move to our grandparents' house. My grandmother was pissed at my pops, so he couldn't see me no more. I heard later on that he tried. For the next 2 years, we lived with my grandparents and also moved with one of my mother's friends until she's met my stepdad. I always would think why he wasn't here instead of my real dad. But now I look back, he had a lot of courage to settle down with a woman with 2 kids. We moved to Monterey, California. Now I can remember what happened to me. I lived in an all-white community. It was only a couple of black people in the neighborhood. I made friends with kids. That was how I could identify myself a little bit. So, the beginning of my memory, I was only around white folks. Sports, school, community activities. I was living in the world. This is how I can identify and communicate with white folks so well. I experienced racism at an early age. I got into a disagreement with one of my friends. Then he went to his house so we could play. His mother answered the door and said, "You cannot play with him anymore." My friend was not allowed to come outside and play with us until he moved. That affected me a lot as a kid because us kids were colorblind. At school, I was one of the only black kids in my class and one of the only black kids in the whole school. Teacher told me at 5 years old that I couldn't read or write. I knew at that time that was not true, and I wasn't behind all the other kids in the class. I am the only one that has to stay back. My stepdad was in the Army. That's why he was stationed in Fort Ord, California. I liked that. I got to see this side of things at an early age because later on in my life, other people didn't see about this side the way I did with white folks where they lived. From there, we traveled with my stepdad. The Army took us to Japan, South Korea, and Germany. First stop was Japan. When I got there, the first thing I realized was it was like another world that was not thinking about anything that was happening in America. It was a Japanese artist that had a place at the bottom of the building where we were staying. He would sell canvases and make canvases. He showed interest in me. I was different. I was black. He said, "Would you like to help?" It was real boring to me out there. So that would be one of the daily activities was helping him with his canvases. This is when I first got attached to art through him. I was still a kid and colorblind. I learned a lot about Asian culture. Something I really didn't like was eating soup for breakfast. It snowed in all 3 countries. When I was in Germany at an early age, I knew it was where Hitler was, but the people were not prejudiced to me out there at that time, so I did not experience racism in Germany. When I came back to Monterey, California, after being in all 3 of those countries, I could see the whole world differently. We moved to Pasadena, California, the corner from the apartment house nothing but black folks. Not a white person or Asian in sight. But while I was around all these black folks, I had an advantage. I seen the other side already. I knew they never experienced that. But this was a new experience to me. We lived in the middle of the ghetto. I was 7 years old. My neighborhood was always something to do, like block parties, and a lot of kids my age in the neighborhood. I was into sports and playing baseball across the street from the projects. I ended up meeting all of those kids from the projects and in my neighborhood, at the schools, all black folks in all those areas. I started learning more about black culture and myself. All the kids I grew up with got caught up in the world of gangs and drugs later on. My stepdad had a job as a cameraman at Paramount Studios for Family Ties in Webster. He would invite me to come, but would tell me I would have to stay all day. The first day I went, and then on, I would sit in the audience. It would be about 10 people in the audience while Family Ties cast would practice all day and do the show live. Later on that day, we would leave at 4 a.m. and would come back home at 2 a.m. All day I still liked being there. I would watch everybody's position and study them. And seeing the teamwork of the production, as long as I had my donuts, I would be happy. The whole cast would pull the show off live at a later hour. I was amazed and shocked. I looked up to Michael J. Fox because he showed me responsibility. About him, he was the lead, very young. Sometimes I would ask him if he was okay, and if he needed somebody to talk to, I was there for him. I would play with Tina Yozers. They would find time for her to still be a kid. Also, the same thing happened for Webster. They would use me for audience sound backgrounds in a little room with about 15 other people. This was the era of drugs. My stepdad used cocaine. The studios found out, he got fired. And that was the last time I stepped foot into Paramount Studios. After that, I knew that I had to create a story for me to come back. And then I took it to the ghetto in search of a story, looking up to the local gang members and drug dealers for guidance. This is where I got my passion for making. It was also the era of graffiti because of New York. My favorite movie was Beat Street. I got into painting on walls and books. Even in my pants, I would wear to school. Breakdancing and pop locking was in style. Hip-hop, I got my first 3 records, Grandmaster Flash and the Furious 5, Sugar Hill Gang, and the LL Cool J. I would love hip-hop. My parents would play oldies, funk music all day. I liked all music. I started to try to sing oldies and write rap music. Me and my friends started a rap group with a beatboxer named Lunchbox. We were called Third Dimension. This is when I first got started making my own music. When we went into the studios to make a song at 11 years old, and we also had a performance at the Boys Club. At 12 is where I stopped all of those things. Newest trends was gangs. I wanted to be popular so bad that I put myself out there. From age 12 until I was 24 years old, I was into gangs and drug dealing. That took my mind away from art, film, and music. I met my wife when I was 17 years old. I always knew my wife was going to be from Mexico. Why? Because I visited Mexico a couple of times and I love the culture and the people. At 24 years old is when my wife my neighborhood I lived through the crack epidemic and the gang epidemic. And your mind can be stuck in that era. And you won't see what is on the other side. You only see who is spending money and who is making money. Material things looking up to money makers doing illegal activity. In the rich neighborhood, material things were stocks, markets, property, and businesses. I did not see those things in my mind during my teenage years. I was blind to see what was right and what was wrong. I wasted a lot of time focusing on the wrong things. At 20 years old, I read 10 African American books in Birmingham, Alabama. Made me see everything differently. Why? Because the school history books told us nothing. When I first entered high school, I browsed through the history book and showed me the same things from elementary and junior high school. No new African American people, Latino, Asian history. I never went back to that history class. After that first day, I ended up dropping out of high school. I rebelled. I didn't practice in class or pledge allegiance. I got kicked out of high school for ditching and fighting the rival gangs. But after reading those African American books at 20, I seen Bloods and Crips as all black people killing each other. Why? Reading those books showed me how much black folks went through. My community wasn't taught that or studied it, but it wasn't in any books at all. You had to research these books in the library. I was confused and disturbed by the way blacks were portrayed in school, on TV, and in history. I missed the other side of things through the years. What I did acquire was stories in my ghetto, real gangster things you would never believe could happen, betrayal, death, and struggle